A barefoot boy whispers a prayer into the morning sky. A billionaire watches his broken son struggle to stand. One is searching for a reason to hope. The other is searching for a reason to breathe. Their worlds are about to collide, and nothing will ever be the same. But how can a homeless child carry the key to a stranger's healing? Zion Douglas wakes before the sun, curled beneath a threadbare coat on a park bench. His stomach growls. His hands tremble, but his eyes somehow are calm. He walks to a fountain, splashes cold water on his face. People pass. They don't see him, or pretend they don't. Still, Zion looks up at the clouds and whispers, "Please, if someone needs me today, show me." Across the city, Chris Westford stares at his reflection and sees a man he barely recognizes. His wealth surrounds him, but he's drowning in shame. His son, Tom, once ran through these halls. Now, the scrape of crutches on marble is all that breaks the silence. Eliza barely speaks anymore. And Chris, haunted by the crash that changed everything, tells himself he's taking Tom to the park for some air. But he's really running from a house that feels like a mausoleum. Zion walks. Chris drives. Two broken prayers, moving toward the same bench, and the boy who no one notices. He's about to become the miracle no one sees coming. Before we dive into this emotional journey of hope, pain, and an unbelievable miracle, if stories like this touch your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from. Now let's begin this unforgettable story. The park was quiet, just waking up with the sun. Birds chirped lazily. A breeze carried the scent of damp leaves and fresh earth. Chris Westford stepped out of the car and opened the door for Tom. "You sure you want to try walking here?" he asked, his voice tight. Tom nodded, already gripping his crutches. "It's just grass, Dad. I've got this." Chris swallowed hard and forced a smile. He hated how heavy everything had become. Every step Tom took felt like a silent indictment. They walked slowly down the grassy path. Tom's crutch sank slightly into the dirt. He wobbled, and the world seemed to freeze. "Tom!" Chris lunged forward, hard in his throat, but someone beat him to it. A blur of motion. Small, quick, sure. A boy, thin, barefoot, no more than 7 or 8. Caught Tom gently before he hit the ground. His hands, though small, were steady. "Kind. You okay?" the boy asked, his voice soft. Tom stared at him, wide-eyed, then smiled. "Thanks." Chris skidded to a stop. His breath caught. The boy looked homeless, clothes too big, face smudged, but there was something peaceful about him. Then the boy did something that sent a shiver down Chris's spine. He touched Tom's leg, right above the knee, and said softly, "This part hurts the most." Chris froze. "What did you say?" The boy didn't flinch, just looked up with deep brown eyes that held too much knowing. "I can feel it." Chris took a step forward. "Who are you?" Before the boy could answer, 2 of Chris's security guards came jogging over, tense. "Mr. Westford, everything okay? Want us to escort him out?" Zion, though he hadn't said his name yet, lowered his head, as if used to being chased off. "No," Tom blurted. "He helped me. He caught me." Chris hesitated. Every instinct told him to keep his son safe, but something else, something quieter, told him to listen. The boy stepped back, eyes still calm. "I don't want anything," he said. "Just your son will be okay someday." Chris blinked. "Why would you say that?" But the boy didn't answer. He just turned, barefoot on cold grass, and walked away. Tom watched him go. "Dad, who was that?" Chris didn't answer. His heart was pounding, and something, he didn't know what, was stirring in his chest. He looked down at Tom, who stood a little taller now, the fall forgotten. Chris turned back toward the boy. But Zion was already gone, vanished into the trees like mist. The wind picked up. A single leaf spiraled past. Chris stood still for a long moment. Something holy had brushed past them. He knew it. God, what just happened? He thought. He didn't know it yet, but that was the first prayer he'd whispered in years. And somewhere beyond the trees, Zion paused, looked back once, and smiled. 2 days later, the same park looked nothing like it had before. White tents arched over linen-covered tables. Champagne glasses sparkled in the sun. Wealth whispered through pearls, suits, manicured smiles. Chris Westford stood near the podium, nodding politely as another donor offered vague promises of support. Behind his eyes, a storm brewed. He wasn't thinking about stocks or speeches. He was thinking about that boy. Zion, Tom had said. The name wouldn't leave him alone. Dad, Tom's voice broke through the noise. He's here. Chris turned stiff. What? Tom was already hurrying toward a bench under the shade of an old oak. And there he was. Zion, alone, barefoot, chewing on a crust of bread like it was a feast. Tom sat beside him like they were old friends. I hoped you'd come, he said, grinning. Heads began to turn. Whispers. Raised brows. Someone stifled a laugh. Chris felt heat rise to his neck. Guests began pulling out phones. A man in a navy blazer muttered, Is that a street kid? Then came the voice Chris dreaded. Well, Lydia Westford drawled, her heels clicking on stone as she approached. Looks like your son's found his new best friend in the city's trash pile. Chris winced. Lydia, not now. Oh, especially now, she said loudly. Your big charity event, ruined by a barefoot prophet with crusty bread. What will the headlines say? People chuckled. Cameras clicked. Chris looked at Zion, quiet, unbothered, eyes steady. He felt the pressure, the scrutiny, the shame. So he said it, loud enough for the crowd to hear. If this homeless boy can heal my son, I'll adopt him myself. Laughter erupted. Even Lydia clapped slowly, mockingly. Now that's a promise I'd pay to see. Tom looked stunned. Dad, but Zion didn't laugh. He stood up, wiped his hands on his shirt, took a small step forward, and said calmly, Can I try? The park went still. No wind, no rustling leaves, just silence and the pounding of Chris's heart. You're serious? Chris asked, voice tight. Zion nodded. He said out loud. More phones rose. A guest whispered, This is insane. Lydia rolled her eyes. This should be good. Chris looked at his son, who looked back at him with wide, pleading eyes. And for a moment, just a flicker, he wondered, what if? Fine, he said under his breath. Fine, let's see what happens. Zion stepped closer, slowly, like he wasn't afraid of anyone watching. He knelt down in front of Tom. Then he placed both hands gently on Tom's legs and closed his eyes. Chris's heart thundered. Lydia smirked. And in the center of it all, a homeless boy whispered something no one could hear. Then Tom gasped. Zion knelt slowly, like he had all the time in the world. The party crowd, once buzzing with laughter and judgment, now watched in stunned silence. Tom looked down at him, uncertain. Hope and fear tangled in his chest like threads in a knot. Zion looked up at him with calm eyes. No show, no drama, just peace. Then, the boy gently rested both hands on Tom's legs. A beat passed. Then, Tom inhaled sharply. Oh, a warmth rushed through him, like sunlight pouring inside his bones. It wasn't heat. It was life. Alive. Alive. Something inside him was alive again. One of his crutches slipped and clattered to the pavement. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Lydia stepped forward, face pale. Chris didn't move. Zion leaned forward and whispered something, but no one could hear the words. It wasn't for them. Tom looked down at his legs, then at Zion. He reached out, took a breath, and lifted one foot off the ground, then the other. He stood. The crowd surged closer. Phone shook in trembling hands. Tom took one step, then another. Then he walked. No crutches, no limping, just walked. A scream burst from somewhere in the crowd. Is this real? Oh my God. What's happening? Eliza Westford, who had stayed frozen in the back of the tent all day, let out a sob so loud it cracked in her throat. She collapsed into a chair, weeping into her hands. Lydia's jaw dropped. That's impossible. Chris didn't hear her. He couldn't hear anything. All he saw was his son running toward him, and he dropped to his knees as Tom threw his arms around him. Chris held him tight, too tight, like if he let go, this moment would vanish. Tears poured down his face. Tom, buddy, how are you? He looked up at Zion. The barefoot boy stood still. Dust clung to his pants, and a light breeze lifted his hair. What did you do? Chris whispered. Zion tilted his head. His voice was quiet, but this time everyone heard. I asked for help. That was all. Silence followed, heavy and sacred. Then someone murmured, "He did say he'd adopt him." Cameras turned. All eyes swung toward Chris, the billionaire who made a promise no one expected him to keep. And Zion, he just looked at Chris, waiting, not demanding, not begging, just waiting for an answer. The crowd leaned in. Chris's mouth parted. Tom held his hand. And Zion smiled, like he already knew what came next. Flashbulbs burst as Chris shielded Tom and Zion, shoving past reporters like a man walking through fire. Mr. Westford, did you mean what you said? Will you really adopt the boy? Was that a stage miracle? Security held the line, but the noise chased them all the way to the car. Tom refused to let go of Zion's hand. I'm not leaving him, Dad, Tom said, voice steady, eyes locked. I won't. Chris stared at the boy, dusty, barefoot, impossibly calm. Just for the night, he told himself. Just until things settle. The car pulled into the Westford estate long after dark. Tom led Zion, and like he was guiding royalty. Zion didn't gawk at the chandeliers or the marble staircase. Didn't ask about the expensive art or the grand piano. He just looked around slowly and whispered, "Thank you." Chris blinked. For what? For this bed, Zion said, touching the blanket like it was treasure. For the warm lights. For being safe. Eliza came down the stairs in silence, her eyes red but softer than they'd been in months. When she saw Zion, she stopped. Something about her made her inhale sharply, like she was seeing sunlight again for the first time. Zion smiled. Hi. She knelt in front of him, tears welling up. You must be freezing. Come with me. I'll find you something warm to wear. Zion nodded gratefully. Thank you, ma'am. No one had called her ma'am in years without sarcasm or distance. Later that night, Tom and Zion sat cross-legged on the floor of Tom's room, building towers out of Legos and laughing like they'd known each other forever. Chris stood in the hallway, hidden, watching them. He felt everything at once. Relief, confusion, gratitude, fear. What is happening to my family? What does this boy mean to us? To me? Zion looked up suddenly. Their eyes met. He didn't say anything, just smiled gently, like he could see the war inside Chris's soul. Chris looked away. He turned the corner and ran straight into Lydia, arms crossed, face like ice. I won't let this happen, she said without flinching. You can feed him, clothe him, even play pretend for the cameras, but that boy will never become a Westford. Chris didn't answer, because deep down, A voice whispered what he already feared. He didn't know if he had the strength to keep the promise he made. In the stillness of midnight, Zion knelt beside his borrowed bed, hands folded, eyes closed. "God," he whispered, "please help them love without fear." And down the hall, Chris sat awake in the dark, terrified that he already does. By sunrise, the world had changed. Homeless child performs miracle on billionaire's son. The headline blazed across screens, splashed in bold above Zion's wide eyes and bare feet. The footage from a charity event had gone viral overnight, shared by influencers, dissected by theologians, mocked by late-night hosts. News vans lined Westford Estate like vultures circling something sacred. Chris watched it unfold from his office, jaw tight. CNBC was talking stocks. Fox was talking spiritual fraud. Reddit was talking aliens. His phone wouldn't stop ringing. "Chris, this is a PR nightmare. You need to separate yourself. Pull out of the foundation partnership, or our investors will walk." The stock had dropped 4 points since breakfast. In the middle of it all, Lydia's voice slithered through every room like smoke. "I'm just saying," she whispered to a board member over lunch. "How do we know the boy didn't manipulate him somehow?" Another whisper to a journalist. "There's no record of him. No medical scans. What if it's all part of something bigger?" And then calls. Anonymous. To Child Protective Services. Allegations of exploitation, of danger, of spiritual abuse. By evening, the front gate was swarmed with protesters waving signs. "Faith fraud. Adopt our sick kids too. Miracles shouldn't be for sale." Tom sat curled on the couch, eyes red, holding Zion's hand like a lifeline. "They're gonna take him, Dad," he sobbed. "Aren't they? They're gonna take him away." Chris knelt in front of him, trying to sound stronger than he felt. "No one's taking anybody. He stays right here." But his voice cracked on the last word. Zion said nothing all day. He helped Eliza set the table, thanked the staff, sat quietly while the noise outside grew louder. When asked if he was okay, he always smiled and said, "I have everything I need." But that night, as the lights dimmed and the house braced for whatever came next, Chris found him staring out the window. Flashing lights from cameras, yelling voices, chaos at the gate. Zion watched it all with soft, sorrowful eyes. "I didn't mean to cause trouble," he said quietly. Chris didn't know what to say, because the truth was, Zion hadn't caused any of this. People did. Fear did. Greed did. Power did. And deep down, Chris knew the world didn't want miracles. It wanted control. Somewhere out there, someone dialed another number. Another accusation. Another threat. Inside, Zion folded his blanket neatly on the guest bed, then bowed his head. "God," he whispered, "help them see what love really looks like." And outside the mansion walls, the storm kept coming. The first time Tom ran again, it wasn't on camera. It wasn't for anyone's approval. It was just a backyard moment, bare feet on grass, breathless laughter echoing under the wide blue sky. Zion clapped and chased him, stumbling with joy. Eliza leaned on the porch railing, hands over her mouth, tears slipping past her smile. "He's really doing it," she whispered. Then she laughed, genuinely, freely, and disappeared into the kitchen for the first time in years. That night, she made dinner. Not the staff, her spaghetti, with too much garlic, and it tasted like resurrection. "Seconds?" she asked, holding the pot. Zion's eyes lit up. "Yes, please." Chris watched it all unfold in quiet awe. The warmth, the life, the miracle unfolding beyond just Tom's legs. Zion hadn't just healed his son. He'd healed the house. Eliza smiled more. Tom laughed louder. The shadows that had hung in the corners of every room began to lift. Chris found himself lingering longer in doorways, just to watch it, just to feel something he thought he'd lost forever. Peace. Until it shattered. Breaking news. Westford family split over homeless child billionaire's sister files legal block against adoption. The article dropped like a bomb. Lydia's name stamped all over it. Chris is emotionally compromised, she stated in her court motion. He's allowing a stranger with no history to influence his son and jeopardize his business. She labeled Zion a spiritual manipulator, called the miracle coincidence, and accused Chris of creating an unstable home environment driven by grief and guilt. The words stung worse than betrayal. They felt like war. Chris stood at the window as the lawyers read the motion out loud in his study. Zion sat on the rug, playing chess with Tom like nothing had changed, like the world hadn't just tried to tear them apart. Chris clenched his fists. "She's not going to win," he said quietly. "I made a promise." He turned back toward his son, toward the boy who didn't ask for any of this, who just wanted to belong. It wasn't about a miracle anymore. It was about family, and Chris was ready to fight for his. In the courtroom of public opinion, sides were already forming. Reporters circled. Lawyers prepared. Lydia smiled like a queen playing her final move. But inside the Westford house, Zion looked up from the chessboard, straight at Chris, and said softly, "She's not your real enemy." The courtroom was packed. Reporters lined the back wall, scribbling notes, whispering headlines into phones. Cameras weren't allowed, but their absence didn't stop the tension from crackling through the air like static. Chris sat beside Zion at the defense table, heart thudding so loudly he could barely hear the gavel drop. Lydia arrived like a storm wrapped in silk. 3 lawyers in tow, a private psychologist. Stacks of documents Chris knew were built on manipulation and lies. The judge was firm, expression unreadable. "Let's begin." Lydia's attorneys came first, methodical, cold, polished. They called Zion a risk, an unknown, a potential manipulator. "He has no legal record, no documented past, no formal education," the lawyer argued. "He displays unusual influence over the Westford child and family dynamic." They played audio clips out of context. They showed grainy video stills. They submitted a psychologist's opinion that Zion exhibited cult-like behavioral influence. Then came Zion's turn to speak. He rose slowly alone, tiny, barefoot in his press suit pants and hand-me-down blazer. "Zion," the judge asked gently, "do you understand why you're here?" Zion nodded. "Because they're trying to decide where I belong." "And where do you belong?" Zion looked over at Tom, then Eliza, then Chris. "I belong where I'm loved." Silence fell like a prayer. When asked more questions, Zion remained humble, grateful, unshaken. "I don't want to replace anyone. I don't want attention," he said quietly. "I just want to stay where God sent me." Tom took the stand next. His voice trembled. His legs didn't. "They say he's nobody," he whispered, looking at the judge. "But Zion's not nobody. He's my brother." Then, louder, eyes wet, "Please don't take my brother away." Eliza's voice shook with emotion as she defended him. "He brought something into our home that we lost years ago, like he didn't ask for anything. He just gave." Then Chris stood, and for the first time in public, he spoke the truth. About the car accident, about the guilt, about how his son's laughter had died, until a barefoot boy stepped in like an answered prayer. "I didn't just find a boy on a park bench," he said, eyes locked on the judge. "I found the grace I thought I no longer deserved." Lydia rose slowly from her seat, voice sharp and cold. "Or," she said, "you found a child desperate enough to say what you needed to hear." gasps, murmurs. The judge silenced the court with a glare. Chris sat back down, jaw clenched, tears in his eyes. The judge looked at everyone, then announced, "This hearing is adjourned. I'll issue a ruling in 3 days." Zion sat still, hands folded in his lap. Outside the courtroom, the sky turned gray. Rain began to fall in quiet sheets against the glass, and Chris whispered under his breath, "Lord, if you're still listening, don't let us lose him." The courtroom was still. No flashbulbs, no whispers, just the sound of breath being held. Zion sat between Chris and Eliza, his tiny hands folded, feet swinging just above the floor. He didn't seem nervous, just ready. Tom sat a few rows back, fists clenched in his lap, eyes wide, hopeful. Lydia glared from across the aisle, her lawyers whispering in her ear, but she didn't listen. Her gaze never left the boy she still refused to understand. The judge shuffled his papers slowly, too slowly, looked up. "I've reviewed all the testimony, the evidence, the pleas." A pause, a sigh, a faint smile breaking through her stern face. "This case has reminded me why I do this job." She looked at Zion. Zion Douglas. The room leaned in. "You are now, by law and by love, Zion Westford. The adoption is approved." The courtroom erupted. Tom let out a yell that echoed off the walls and sprinted down the aisle. "Zion!" He tackled him in a hug, so fierce they both tumbled onto the bench, laughing and crying all at once. Eliza collapsed into Chris's arms, sobbing into his shoulder. "He's ours. He's ours." Even the judge had to blink something away. "Court adjourned," she whispered, voice thick. Lydia stood without a word, her face blank, her empire defeated not by argument, but by love. She turned on her heel and walked out, and for the first time in years, no one followed her. Chris knelt in front of Zion, heart pounding with more joy than he thought he could hold. He placed his hands gently on Zion's shoulders. "You didn't just heal my son," he said, voice breaking. "You healed me." Zion looked into his eyes, full of something ancient and innocent all at once. "I only loved him the way I knew how," he said simply. Chris pulled him into his arms. The whole family wrapped around him. Not perfect, not without scars, but whole. Later that afternoon, the mansion's gates stayed shut. No cameras, no interviews, no more noise. Just a garden, washed clean by rain. Tom ran through the grass barefoot, laughter echoing like it had years ago. Zion chased him, barefoot too, his face lifted toward the sky. Two brothers, no longer strangers, no longer broken. Chris watched from the porch, arm around Eliza, eyes full. "They're free," she whispered. He nodded. Finally, Zion paused at the edge of the trees, looked up one more time. The sun broke through the clouds, golden and warm. He smiled. "Thank you," he whispered. Then he turned and ran toward his family.
If this story reminded you that God can bring beauty out of brokenness, then don't keep it to yourself. Share this with someone who needs hope today. Subscribe for more stories like this. And tell us in the comments where you're watching from. You never know who your words might encourage.